Nearly qualified pharmacist here. So obligatory, not a doctor. Our pharmacy offers travel vaccines for people going away to countries with a high likelihood of severe tropical disease. Star parenting goes to the parents who got themselves vaccinated for rabies, but not their 2 primary school age, elementary, for non-Brits, children. Med school student here. I was getting my hair cut and I was talking to the barber about how more people should get the new meningitis B vaccine since I know a person who got meningitis B and almost died. The desk lady went off about how vaccines are dangerous, and pretty much every single anti-vaxx's talking point. I explained the actual facts behind vaccines and said that I'm studying medicine. I think I might know what I'm talking about, and then she went off about professors not knowing what they are talking about and that they just teach what they are told to teach so that we can all be brainwashed into supporting the big pharmaceutical companies and that my proof were all fabricated by them. Edit. Someone told me we made it into YouTube. When I was a med student, I had a parent who wanted to do a delayed vaccination schedule. Basically it means that you get all the same vaccinations but you pointlessly and foolishly do it over a longer time period. The mom had read a book promoting this practice that was unfortunately written by an MD. My pediatric attending had zero chill. Is that the book written by Dr.? Yes. Well, then you should know that I was in the same medical school class as Dr. but I got much better scores than he did. It'll tell a different kind of story. I am an ER doc and recently had this interaction with a patient. Adult male comes in with fever. He comes back positive for the flu. Me. You have the flu. I will write you for a prescription for Tamiflu. Patient. Doesn't that cause autism? This guy couldn't even remember that it was vaccines that reportedly cause autism. And he couldn't remember that it wasn't the flu vaccine. And of course he is wrong about vaccines causing autism. And he is a grown-ass adult that thinks he will suddenly be autistic. In medical school I saw a kiddo whose parents refused vaccines, and so when they were given the vaccine refusal form to sign, this form essentially said that the parents understood that refusing vaccines was against medical advice, that their kiddo could get sick from all those preventable diseases, and that they wouldn't hold the doctor practice liable for any complications that the kiddo may get from said preventable diseases. This mom pulled out a Sharpie and blacked out the part about the doctor not being held liable. The parents thought that we'd be cool with them just changing that form just for them, and they wanted the doctor to be held liable for their moronic choice. Of course this didn't work and they were told to sign the form or they would be discharged from the practice and have to find another. They refused to sign and were told to leave after given a list of other pediatricians in the area. We had a 14-year-old female come in for abdominal pain one time. She weighed 80 pounds, looked sickly. Her mother refused to let her eat anything but a handful of things. Nothing with very much protein at all. She literally had a binder full of articles about how horrible vaccines are, all the bad things they put in food these days, etc. She had completely brainwashed this kid so the kid believed it too. Her labs showed malnutrition. Her teeth were horrible. Just a sad case all around. Friend of mine is a military OBGYN. Was at a OB appointment with a pregnant dependent and service member. He had just returned from AFG a few months prior. OB mentions about follow-ups after delivery and first year of life, including vaccines. Wife says, I read on the internet that vaccines cause autism. I don't think we're going to do that. Husband says, I saw a lot of little graves in Afghanistan. Sure as it we are getting our kid vaccinated. I feel like Family Guy said it best. There's an episode where Lois and Peter kidnap this child to get him to a hospital because the parents believe prayer will heal their kid. So Lois eventually has to confront them and says something like maybe the vaccines and medicines are God's answer to your prayers. So why keep praying if you're going to wipe your ass, with his reply. I'm not a doctor, but an RN in public health. I recently had a mother call me to ask me if it was a smart idea for her child should get the MMR vaccine. Why was she asking this? She was worried that would make his autism worse. Coming soon to AskReddit. Funeral directors of Reddit. What are some of your anti-vax parents' stories? Not a doctor, but a nurse and a vaccine advocate. Once had a public argument with a friend from long ago. He argued that by not vaccinating his kids and risking terrible side effects and possible autism, he was placing no one else at risk. however acknowledged the potential risk to his kids. After attempting to explain the potential risk to others and him failing to understand, I created an analogy which I still use to this day. Imagine if my kids and your kids get into the same car. Both of your kids don't put on seatbelts. Therefore, if there is an accident, there is an increased risk that your kids will die and also harm my children in the process. This seemed to click with him and he doesn't share his anti-vax propaganda on social media anymore. Not directly related to my being a doctor, but a mutual friend of mine and my wife's is a chiropractor and anti-vaxxer, refused to vaccinate her first 2 kids. I didn't want her or her kids coming anywhere near our place when we had newborns or kids less than 2 because of the risk her unvaccinated kids placed on my partially vaccinated babies. She got all offended saying the usual rubbish like if vaccines work, what do your kids have to fear? And your kids are more risk to mine because they'll be also shedding viruses. Her third child was born with cystic fibrosis, which makes them very susceptible to all forms of respiratory and airborne infectious diseases. Suddenly the whole hypocritical family is vaccinated against everything. Had a kid come in for generic upper respiratory virus. Asked mom if he was vaccinated, as is routine. She said no. When I asked why not, her response was, well, my boyfriend was vaccinated and he still got meningitis, so they don't even work. I told her that's the same as saying your friend got bruised by a seatbelt in a car accident, so you don't wear them when you drive. I want to hear pro-vax stories. Egg. A parent came in and I told them their child needed an MMR vaccine. The parent agreed, so I gave the child the shot. The child lived a healthy life and didn't get autism. Had a 5 or 6 years old patient who had a super hippie mom. No reason for not vaccinating other than she doesn't want to despite counseling many times. Kid also had asthma and would consistently come in for exacerbations despite prescribing appropriate controller meds. The amount of exacerbations just didn't make sense. One day, I sent my student to see him first while I called the pharmacy to see if his meds were received. The student came back saying I can't get a history from mom. She's literally falling asleep while talking to me. Also, pharmacy said the meds haven't been picked up from the last 3 visits. That was enough for me to call CPS. Mom was on drugs. Living situation deplorable. Last I heard, kid was moved to an aunt who caught him up with age appropriate vaccines. I'm not a medical doctor but a mental health therapist. Went to do a new client intake and while asking the mother about the kid's medical history, vaccination records etc, she said he was not vaccinated because vaccines cause autism and she didn't want to risk her son getting it. Then when I went to meet the kid, within 5 seconds of laying eyes on him I could tell he was autistic. Worst part was that when I told her, she became very upset and started yelling at her husband saying he must have gotten the kid secretly vaccinated, and then immediately ran out the house and took the kid to the emergency room for testing and just left me and the dad in the living room just kind of staring at each other. Never answered my calls or texts again after that and I had to get DCF involved. I'm not a doctor but try researching the guy that claimed vaccine causes autism. Struck off for falsifying and making up the results. Performing procedures that harmed kids. Not a good man. Okay, I am not a doctor but I'm pregnant so I see one pretty regularly right now. Lol, it was time for my TDAP booster and I was asking about the MMR booster. My OB asked if we are planning to vaccinate the baby, and I told him that shouldn't even be a question he feels he needs ask any of his patients. So he told me this story about a teenage patient who came in with her mom. The mom was going on and on about how she teaches her child to live a healthy and holistic lifestyle free of drugs, vaccines, and chemicals. Well, turned out the daughter had gotten gonorrhea from her boyfriend despite her healthy and holistic lifestyle. My OB said he felt great seeing the mother's face when he delivered the news. Lol. I work at a clinic that doesn't treat kids, work-related illnesses and injuries, and I never really treated kids, so not many. One woman asked for my reassurance that she was doing the right not vaccinating her kids because other doctors haven't been happy about that. I told her that she would have to meet with 100 or more doctors to find one that agrees with her. She rolled her eyes and condescendingly said, I guess you're all bought by Big Pharma then. I called her a ducking idiot and told her to go to another doctor next time. Not a doctor but so, significant other, works with children that have autism. She has one parent that consistently tells her she regrets vaccinating her kid. She then asks questions to Miso about which vaccines are the ones that cause autism as if it's a big secret. Miso tells her that autism is predetermined before birth and signs just aren't noticeable until around 2 years of age. She still tries to justify her logic with other anti-vax parents' stories from FB. Miso has 2 master's degrees towards this field. It blows my mind how they can still argue with overwhelming facts. These stories should be compiled, printed, and left in the waiting rooms of every ER, OBGYN, and pediatrician's office across the world. Not a doctor. Several years ago during a bad flu outbreak, hubby and I were visiting family members. Chatting away, hubby mentions that he had lost a second co-worker that month to complications from the flu. Grumpy in-laws bellowing about how flu isn't real. They only want you to get shots to make money off of you. Yada, yada, yada. Meanwhile, the news blaring from the screen in front of them is talking about 3 local medical centers are overwhelmed with flu patients in the ICU, most of which were pregnant women. Of course, this is the same family member who firmly believes that the graduates of Bible college come away with a far greater education than medical doctors. She demanded to know when had any good come from Harvard Medical. I said polio vaccine. She claims polio has never existed. It's made up to get us to take poison. Auntie Vile, you were a teenager in the 50s. There is no way you could be unaware of polio being real. Some people just want to be stupid. Not a doctor, yet, but a med school student. A fellow student of mine is very happy about not being completely vaccinated. She is also happy that our country, Germany, is still a free country considering vaccination, since she believes that they don't really work. At this point, I'd like to remind you that she is a medical student, and at least once a year, we have to have a medical checkup to make sure our mandatory vaccinations are in order. Simply because we're studying and working at a hospital with a lot of immunocompromised patients. Anyway, she was happy to inform me that she only got the vaccinations that were absolutely mandatory. So she got no tetanus shot, for example, and she believes she will never get tetanus, simply because she doesn't want to, and she believes that is enough. Since our minds are so capable of healing our bodies, if we let them go free, for example by using hallucinogenic drugs, luckily that can only harm her and no others. I'm really not a bad person, but I kind of hope she cuts her foot on a rusty nail and gets a little bit of tetanus. Nothing that will kill her or in any way have a lasting effect on her, besides maybe convincing her that vaccinations work. I really don't want her to become a doctor. I am not a doctor nor anti-vaxxer, but my parents' friends, which I am also close friends to, plus to their son and daughter, didn't vax their children. Nothing really bad happened, just that their son, which is 3 years older than me, I am 23, got a tick to bite him during a hiking trip. Over here, Switzerland, ticks can pass 2 diseases. Meningitis, which is vaxable every 7 years, a fake, and Lyme disease, which is not vaxable but treatable with antibiotics. After the tick bit him, every sign showed towards a Lyme disease infection. The parents decided to not do anything but using homeopathy and stones to cure it. The problem, however, is with Lyme disease, it doesn't show signs for ages, even decades. So now chances are that in 10 years from today, infection happened 7-12 years ago or something, the disease will start to develop and hamper his movement. So back then he didn't really know what he should have done, so his parents just ruled over him without giving him the option to go for antibiotics. My only hope is that the disease doesn't develop and he can live in peace. Not a doctor, but a story I heard stuck with me. The head of pediatrics from a Toronto hospital, I forgot which one, was giving a talk and told a story about how, early in her practice, she had a little boy in for his scheduled vaccines, and was answering the nervous mother's questions. The mother planned to go ahead with the vaccines, but had heard lots of anti-vax propaganda, and so she was worried and had lots of questions while they were talking. But before they administered the vaccines, the poor little kid suffered a grand mal seizure. It was really bad. The kid ended up getting admitted to the hospital and suffered a fairly serious brain injury. It occurred to the pediatrician much later that if that seizure had hit 10 minutes later, or if the appointment had been 10 minutes earlier, Nothing would have ever convinced that poor mother that it wasn't the vaccine that caused the seizure. Not a doctor, but my sil was very much on the fence about getting her daughter vaccinated. She's a smart and rational person, but it shocked me to hear. I had to come at her from an angle of compassion and told her that I understood she wanted to do what was best for her daughter, and a lot of what she had seen on FB had made her scared and confused about what that right thing is. I had to explain why the vaccines causing autism was false and how herd immunity works, especially with my niece in nursery. It worked, and she sold it to my niece that if she had the injections then they could go on holiday abroad. Not a doctor, but I worked at a children's hospital in research. At the time as a coordinator, a bunch of us were sitting in our office space talking about medical care of some sort casually. I think maybe flu vaccines. And one coordinator cuts in. Well, I don't know if you've seen the recent research, but there are a number of issues with vaccines that make them unsafe. They are highly correlated with autism. The room got quiet because everyone was polite. One person said, "Oh, I heard that, I think." In an effort to not alienate the girl, I responded, "That's not true," because I couldn't not say that. She said, "Yeah, I'll send you the link." I said, "I think I've probably read the study. It's been rescinded." Then it got more awkward. This was probably 2017. I just couldn't believe that in 2017, a person whose job it is to understand research at a hospital with children can fall victim to bad research that has not been supported by any reputable source since probably the 90s. Doctor here. Guy decided to not get a flu shot this year. Ended up in the ICU with flu infection in his brain. He has currently been in the hospital for a month, most of which in the ICU. Has likely permanent speech difficulty and left-sided weakness. Obligatory not a doctor. My best friend and his wife just had their first kid about a week ago. Yesterday a friend went to visit them with her unvaccinated child while my fiancée and her mom were there visiting as well. First ducking thing out of this friend's mouth where you can use essential oils to pull the metals from the hepatitis vaccine out of the bloodstream. I got diabetes from vaccines. I had a kid come in that was super sick, 3 years old and in septic shock. He had the flu and another compounded viral infection, or maybe pertussis. Heart rate was close to 200, respiratory rate in the 50s, blood pressure in the 70s. Kid was so ducking dry that we could barely get IVs into him and I almost had to drill an IO. We dumped a ton of fluids into him, started him on vasopressors and transferred him to the local children's hospital. I had asked the mom if he was vaccinated and she said no. Vaccines have really bad side effects. They'll make you sick. I explained to her that not getting the vaccines had made her kid 10 times sicker than he ever would have been from any mild vaccine reaction. She told me I was a ducking moron and that I obviously have no clue what I'm talking, and that's the reason her kid was getting transferred. She also told me that recommending she vaccinate her kids was racist. Edit. Didn't expect this to blow up, so some clarifications and answers to common questions. CPS was called and, once again, I was told there would be no investigation. This is their usual response. My wording about it possibly being